Our regrets are stories we tell ourselves. When you constantly worry about your past, you're supporting that belief in your present. We were curious about what would happen if we tried to release those worries and rewrite our stories. So we decided to do an experiment.
What happens if we dedicate time to relieving our regrets? This is a show where we take a moment to reveal the messy bits about ourselves without judgment. It's a show where we can reflect, learn, grow, and maybe even laugh about our actions, attitudes, and behaviors. It's a place where we can speak about our past and learn from it. Join us on the journey. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Relieve Regret. People who are regular listeners of the podcast might know that I wanted it to be singular and Victoria wanted it to be plural. And I've slowly come over to the plural side, but in my head, it's still singular. So tell us, listeners, what kind of things can you not move on from once you've decided? Anyway, how are you, Victoria?
Hi, everybody. I'm pretty good. I don't know why I said that. You know, you always answer like, I'm good, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
well,
tired.
That's the script. That's the
I'm
social
pretty
script.
Exhausted. That's the social script. I'm been struggling with like how fatigued I am lately, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, actually, in my thing. So I'll leave it at that. But I'd say I'm a 6 out of 10. How are you, Shadow?
6 out of 10. Nice. I woke up a little bit grouchy because I stayed up too late last night. I've been really getting into that silly Inventing Anna show. Or
me too.
Is it Inventing Anna? I don't even remember the name. Yeah. I only have, I think, 2.5 episodes left, so I'm excited.
Me too. We're at the same spot.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
I find it fascinating because it's a true story. I love a true story.
Yeah, for sure. Except for the parts that are made up.
Yeah,
yeah, I like those. So I started kind of rough, but then I went outside at lunch with my dog and there's a big fresh blanket of snow on the ground, but it's not too cold. And she had a lot of fun, like chasing her ball, and like she would like I would throw it and it would go directly into the snow, and she was like running through the fresh snow, and it was really cute. And then, that just really improved my mood. And now I'm talking to you, so that's also improving it. So I feel like I'm going up the roller coaster in terms of like emotional well-being.
Oh, that's good. Is that your cause for applause?
Ooh, no, I have a different cause for applause.
Okay,
do you want to go first for cause of applause or not?
Sure. I'm gonna rewrite the script. So I actually slept until noon today.
Nice.
Which normally I'd guilt myself, but I'm going to give that to myself as cause for applause today.
Amazing.
Because I got lots of sleep and I guess my body needed it and I'm listening to my body. So that's my cause for applause. What's yours?
So great. For me, it's that I've been really getting into a Disney song, which I haven't done since I was like a teenager. Like when I was a teenager, I would listen to I Just Can't Wait to Be King like every morning. Like I loved that song.
Amazing.
It was so great. And then, you just kind of grow, not up, but like kind of grow out of that a little bit. But finding your joy is kind of coming back to the things you liked as a kid, right? So I've really gotten into this movie Encanto. It has really charmed me off my feet. I really, really like it. And there's a song called Surface Pressure in Encanto, and it's sung by the sister named Louisa. And she has a whole song that I think you would really resonate with too, Victoria. It's all about being the strong one of the family.
Oh, yeah.
And like taking on every family burden and like never cracking, no pressure, no mistakes. Like, and this is her song where she's like admitting that sucks. Like it just straight up sucks that everyone sees her as this really strong person, which means she's never allowed to have a moment of like sensitivity or vulnerability. So it's just this really really cool song. And again, I'm back to like listening to it every morning, and I feel like I'm back in high school, like just like rocking out. And it makes me really happy. So I'm just happy that this song exists and this movie exists. And Yeah.
I'm going to give it a listen. I've watched the movie, and I kind of remember the song, but I'm going to give it a listen again.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the suggestion, Shadoe.
So
okay.
we have our regular format today, which is that we're each going to read a letter. And I'm going to go first today.
Yeah, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, I think it is my turn. And yeah, I'm just going to jump right into it because
let's do it.
Why not?
Let's do it.
So I have an experience I need to let go of to move forward. I regret dominating group discussions. This happened at work, in class, social situations, and most regrettably at group therapy sessions. I felt like I was helping the group dynamics by constantly filling in the awkward silences. But as it turns out, when I wait for my turn to hold the mic, I was treated to insights from my fellow participants instead of treating them like an audience. The consequence I'm missing out on due to holding on to this regret of oversharing for so long is that, in a way, I've almost corrected it too much. I'm now like sometimes too quiet in groups, especially at loud family gatherings. I'm hoping to achieve a balance between being entertaining and sharing the time that we have allotted together. Sometimes waiting to be asked is the hardest part, and sometimes it's a relief I don't feel the pressure to come up with an intriguing anecdote as social currency. I apologize to my younger self. I did everything that I could in those moments with the tools I had at the time, and that is okay. That is who I was then, and I have grown in so many ways. I'm relieved because I'm now capable of being a better listener instead of impulsively jumping in. I'm also worthy of being listened to in a deeper way and do not need to rely on jokes and exuberance to get my points across.
Well, thanks for that. Do you want feedback or do you just want to be heard?
Some feedback on that one. Yeah.
Shadoe, I always again, everybody, we never know what each other's going to say. So I always, Shadoe's brain is so much different than mine. So I just love Shadoe's insight. It helps me open up my brain. And yeah, I really love how, again, honest and vulnerable you are about that, because I think we judge ourselves a lot when we look back in terms of being dominating. And as women, we're kind of trained not to be dominating. So I have a curious question. When you look at those things, what's the judgment that you give yourself when you look back and see yourself dominating a discussion? What's the judgment you give yourself?
It's selfishness. I'm embarrassed that I was being selfish. I was also embarrassed that those were opportunities where I could have learned more, and all I did was talk and talk and talk and think I was the teacher or think I was the counselor, you know what I mean? And so sometimes it was that I was taking the reins of a group that I thought I could run better. And that's just unbelievable selfishness. Also, again, I really did think I was being helpful. Because a lot of times in these awkward group things, people need some time to open up. But I wasn't seeing it that way at first.
Were you not comfortable with silence? Is that why?
That was part of it. I also just thought it was a waste of time for all of us to be sitting there in silence. It was well, we all want to talk, don't we? In my head, it was we all want to talk. So if people, maybe it was just that people didn't want to be the first one. So then I was always the first one because I didn't care. And it wasn't until I started kind of metering that participation and not putting my hand up first every single time, that I realized that there was value to those silences. But I would also think I was helping the facilitator in some way. Like if it was a workshop and like, because I find as a facilitator, if I ask a question to a group and I get crickets back, that's devastating. So I was always like, ooh, look at me. I'm not your crickets. I'm here to give you the feedback you're looking for. And again, looking back, it was just that I do see your point about like women being trained to like take up less space. But I honestly think I was taking up not just more than like a woman's share, but more than a fair share. Mm-hmm. Like in most group situations.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to make I was trying to make that point, but I was just saying because it's going to lead to my second question anyways.
Right. Okay, cool.
But I have a question in between is looking back now, do you think you were selfish?
Yeah.
Or was it something else?
No,
was it a need being filled?
It was definitely like also impulsivity now that I know about ADHD and I'm a year into my diagnosis and doing all this other work on it. It's funny, like I just finished a seasonal gig and during training, there was clearly somebody else in training that like maybe has ADHD but doesn't know it yet. And I could see a lot of my younger self in them. And they were like, you know, cutting off people and they were asking every single question. And if they had just been patient enough, they would have gotten the answer and not had to interrupt and ask their question. But like, that was something I did all the time too. And it was like, I literally could not help it. It was just such an impulsive thing for me.
So was it selfish or was it ADHD?
You know, different sides of the same coin, I think.
Interesting.
Like, yeah.
Okay. So my other question is, you said that you kind of flipped to the other end of the spectrum and started becoming like too quiet in groups. And that's what I was kind of saying with like women, we do that, right? We think, oh, I'm being too loud or whatever. And maybe you were.
Right.
Right. And it's okay to acknowledge that you were too. But then we flipped to the other side, afraid of the judgment about being domineering or too loud or whatever. So my question is, how did that affect your self-esteem, confidence, inner monologue when you flipped to the other end of the spectrum?
If I was with people who already knew me, I feel like it caused a little bit extra anxiety because like I was like, oh, I should really explain why I'm being weird right now, or like my version, because being quiet is my version of weird. So like, you know, if people already knew me, that would make me really insecure. But in new groups of people, it was actually really refreshing to be able to like stop myself from cutting them off, to stop myself from like, you know, just saying like, or, you know, saying that this is something that reminds me of this, or like just being able to share that space with other people, especially brand new people. You know, also like, I always took on this like leadership role unintentionally. Like it didn't matter what group I was in. And now I'm finding like, if I just wait a little bit, like someone else will take that vacuum of space, right? And like that's fine. Like I don't always have to be that person.
Yeah, you're giving yourself permission to not be what you think you have to be.
Totally. Yeah. So like, I mean, even in this, again, bring it back to the seasonal gig I just did. We also had like an instant messaging platform where because we had like a little amount of training before we were thrown to the wolves. Lots of times you had like questions that you didn't know how to answer, right? And lots of times I felt I was putting all this extra pressure on me to answer those questions in the past, or be the first person to ask a question if something was unclear. Like if something, you know, but the less I did that, the more I did notice other people doing it. And that was great to not always be the person to be like, oh, actually the answer is this. Cause like, I'm not getting paid a manager's salary. I'm getting paid the same amount as everyone else. But here I am being like, oh no, one of my fellow coworkers needs help. I'll help them instead of doing my own work. And again, it was like an attention thing, I guess.
Such an easy vacuum to get sucked into in the workplace too.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Start doing more work than what you're being paid for. And then I feel like sometimes we get little tiny pats on the back, like, oh, thank you so much, I can rely on you, from coworkers or bosses. But the reality is that our value in our workplace is how much we're paid. And eventually you get upset because you're not getting paid enough and doing so much work, but how much of it did you put on yourself? Totally. So thank you. Thanks for that. Cause I definitely did that when I was working my 9-to-5 job as well. And then you get bitter and angry and you kind of just go down this vacuum or funnel. Right. Yeah. So that's really cool. That's like not the answer I was expecting. Not that I was expecting an answer, but it's cool that for you, what I'm hearing you say is when you're able to be a bit more quiet and just kind of sit back and observe before taking action, it's actually allowing you to feel more connected to people or to the group that you're in.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying this is how the group has to be, which I was doing before. And like, you know, that's much more relief. Also, then when I do, like, I think a trap I would fall into before was that because I would take on that kind of role, I was so afraid to make a mistake. Where now, like, I make a mistake and I'm just like, that I'm in the instant messaging being like, oh, I think I screwed up this ticket. Can someone help me? And like, I don't feel this like big shame about it. Like, cause I've helped people when they've needed help. And now I can ask for that help when I need it, as opposed to just being like, oh no, I have to find a way to fix this on my own, and like wasting time and all this other like stuff that I was really putting on myself that I didn't have to do.
Yeah, if I can like hear it in the way you're talking about it too. It's like a weight was lifted off your shoulders, or relief. You've like, you were putting the expectation on yourself, really.
Oh yeah.
Right. And now it's almost like you've learned this skill of like observing, then interacting, and it's given you better connection. What a cool lesson, I guess, or story that you told us.
Yeah, it's also been, go ahead. See, I'm doing it to you now.
Yeah, no, we do it. We totally do it to each other. I was gonna say, it's almost like the lesson of vulnerability, because it is vulnerability, right? When you release the expectation of yourself, you realize that your fears of releasing that expectation actually aren't true, and you end up getting more support than you thought, or more connection, which really was your fear. Your fear was to not be connected and not get support or not be loved, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely always feel like being helpful is like my cost of admission anywhere I go. So that's been really interesting. There's like a cliche like acronym that goes with this called THINK. Which is when listening to conversation and considering when you want to like jump in, you have to use like the THINK acronym, which is it true? Is it honest? Is it informative? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And so like asking yourself those 5 questions before interjecting with like your point or your joke or your question, also I think has elevated my reputation in a way beyond being helpful. Because now when I do interject, it is with something that's a little bit more curated, I guess. And not that I'm like censoring myself or whatever, but like lots of times like the little snippy peanut gallery comments aren't slipping out because they're not kind and they're not necessary.
What's can you repeat that again just for our listeners, because I've never heard that before.
For sure.
I really like it.
So and I'm sure it's attributed to someone. I just don't know who came up with it. I've seen it around. So T stands for, is it true? H is it honest? Which there is a difference between truth and honesty. I is it informative? So are you just repeating something that somebody else said earlier in the conversation, or is this actually new information?
Ooh, I really like that, because people talk to hear themselves. And I've noticed we're all guilty of it. I do it too. Yeah.
And is it necessary? Because again, sometimes you have information, but it's not very necessarily necessary to the conversation you're having. And K stands for, is it kind? Which I know you value kindness over a lot of other things, and I try to as well. So yeah.
That's really cool. I've never heard that, and I'm going to use that because I connected with a lot of what you said. I'm a natural leader as well, and I've been on a similar journey as you. We talked about it a couple of podcast episodes ago where I was talking about, in my workplace when I started to become paranoid, but I also started taking a leadership role against what was happening to me in my workplace. And I was doing a lot of the same things you're talking about now.
Right.
So thank you. Thank you for that.
You.
That's
Thank
all my
you.
feedback. I want to say thank you
great.
again. Thank you for being vulnerable. I think I always think people can learn from what you have to say. I love the way your brain works. And yeah, thank you.
Again,
And I also want to say there's something you said too. There's value in silences. And I think that's really important to think about too. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. And and anyone who is uncomfortable with silence, it's a practice. It's not something that just like happens overnight. And if it's something you don't even know that you're uncomfortable with, like that even takes time to come to a realization with.
Yeah. I've definitely been on that journey before too. And it's really hard. You're like basically changing a pre-programming in your brain that says that you have to fill the silence. So wow, Shadoe, every episode, I just think, oh my gosh, our listeners are so lucky to hear what you have to say because your life experience, I just think it's relatable. I think, and that again, that's the point of the podcast, everybody. That's why we're here, is to just be honest and talk about the things we're thinking in our head, because we're all normal. Like the things that you're thinking. And the more we discuss them, the more we realize, oh, I'm not alone in having these types of thoughts or these types of regrets, and that it's part of the human experience. And I can still gain self-esteem and confidence and feel better about myself and release these kind of thoughts or regrets or guilt or whatever it is, right? By relieving it and releasing it, we can be more connected and self-aware. And I'm always blown away by my co-host Shadoe.
You're unbelievably sweet. It's so funny that you say those kinds of things, because I feel like I'm not doing anything beyond what I usually do, I guess. Like I keep my circle pretty, like my outer circle, sure, is kind of superficial and like follows all the social cues as we were talking about earlier. I'm good. You know, I'm good too. Like that I do know how to do. I find that more exhausting than talking like this.
Yeah.
Talking like this is what energizes me. It's what brings me closer to my friends. It's never been something I like. You'll say, like you've said this before, like I'll share something and be like, oh wow, like thank you for your courage or bravery. And I'll be like, what? Like I'm sitting here going, no, like it wasn't brave at all.
Right. But the reason I do it, I kind of do it a little because I know it makes you feel uncomfortable, because we've talked about like thank you as a sentence, right? And it's part of building our own self-esteem. You can just say thank you, right? And I think it's something we all need to learn. I need to learn it too. Sure. Like thank you, but really it was a group effort, right? When someone gives you, it's good to acknowledge within yourself, and you might not see it as brave or courageous or honest or vulnerable. But you're leading by example, and we are leading by example. And it's good to acknowledge that, right? It's good to acknowledge that within ourselves. So thank you.
And okay, so do you have a letter to share with us today? I ask as if the answer is going to be anything other than yes.
I sure do.
Wonderful. Do you want to tell us anything about the letter before you jump in, or do you want to just jump in today?
I think I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the podcast or not, but I'm having some health issues. I have fibroids, which are benign tumors in my uterus. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about that. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Great.
All right. So here we go. So I have an experience that I want to let go of in order to move forward. I am feeling regret and a little bit of guilt about not looking after myself and regret about not advocating for myself. So here's my story. About 8 years ago, I started having weird periods and pain. And I went into my doctor and we did an ultrasound and they found fibroids. Fibroids are just small growths. At that time, they were small growths in the uterus and they're generally benign. For those of you that don't know what they are. And I had 3 and they were all about a centimeter big, a centimeter, 2 centimeters. And my doctor at the time said, this is really normal. A lot of women get them in their late 30s. We'll just watch them and it's fine. I said, okay. Now, here's the thing. Fast forward 8 years later, we watched them for a few years. I got an ultrasound every year and they weren't growing. They were maybe growing slightly. So we stopped watching them. 8 years later, I now have 3 fibroids. One's the size of a grapefruit, one's the size of an orange, and one's the size of an apple. And I need to get them surgically removed, and it's going to be full open surgery to get them removed. I have tremendous regret and guilt about not advocating and saying, let's check them more. I want to get them removed anyways. Because the thing is that as I've done more research on it, it's not normal. It's become normalized because there's actually an epidemic of women getting them. And it has something to do with soy mimickers in our food. I mean, there's many, many different stress. There's many different reasons why this is happening, but it's not normal. If I went into the doctor and they said, oh, you have a centimeter large growth on your liver or your kidney, would you be like, okay, no problem. I have a centimeter growth on my liver or my kidney? No, you'd be freaking out, right? And I'm going to go on a feminist thing here, everybody. Warning. But women's health, there isn't as much research around women's health as there is around, it's been a very male dominated field. Like we're going back to 1800s, 1700s, whatever, right? And it is changing, but it's not changing fast enough that we're saying this is normal. And since I started talking about it, I now know a bunch of friends that had the same experience, friends or acquaintances or 6 degrees of separation, saying, yeah, same thing happened to me. They were small. My doctor told me it's no big deal. Fast forward a few years later, they've grown. And I now know people that have had hysterectomies, have had full open surgery, have had complications, have been in pain because of them for years. So my regret can't have kids. My regret is not advocating for myself earlier, because in my gut and in my brain, I knew something was wrong. So it's almost, I guess, I regret being quiet. I regret being quiet. And the consequence of me doing that, is my health. And the consequence of me holding on to this regret now is it's not helping my health as I'm waiting for a surgery date that continues to be postponed because of COVID. But holding on to the regret is just giving me more worry, and that's not good for me either. So I need to release this regret that I feel about that. And I did everything that I could in the moment with the tools I had, because 8 years ago, I wasn't as strong. I hadn't had the life experiences that I have now in terms of saying, I'm going to stand up for myself. I wasn't very good at it. Or whenever I did it, I would have a massive panic and anxiety attack about being judged as bitchy or loud or annoying or a hypochondriac and overreacting, right? So I did everything that I could in that moment, and that's okay. And I need to let go. So that's my story. I mean, I could talk about it for a long time and advocate for it, but that's my story and that's my journey. And I will keep you posted, listeners, as I kind of go through this journey. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Victoria. Do you want feedback today or did you want to be heard?
I'm okay with questions if you have questions, because I
Yeah.
feel that's
Okay.
important to talk about this subject. So if you have questions, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I just have a question over the timeline. So
Yeah.
like 8 years ago, you find them. And then how many years were you getting like checkups, or how many, like, was it an annual checkup? Like how?
This is an
Yeah.
annual checkup for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then they weren't growing. So we're like, okay, they're not
Sure.
shrinking, but they're not growing.
Right.
So we'll stop for a while. Here's the thing that really like makes me angry, that I've had to let go of this anger. And I love my doctor. I'm really good at giving people the benefit of the doubt. He's a man, and maybe he
Right.
doesn't know like women's health as much. I've since been referred to an OBGYN about this, but about a year after we stopped checking, I thought I had hypothyroidism. I had all the signs, or a couple years after. I was gaining weight, my hormones were out of whack, I was losing hair, I was low energy.
Right.
So I go and I get the blood testing for hypothyroid, and they come back and they say there's nothing. At that point, I also should have said,
Right.
could this be caused by the fibroids? Or,
Right.
you know what, at that point though, my doctor should have said,
True.
you know, because all of those symptoms are caused by growing fibroids. Once they get to a certain size, you get the same symptoms as hypothyroidism. They're like, no, your thyroid hormone levels are fine, everything's fine. 2 years later, we know something's wrong. My stomach's protruding. I'm having pain up and down my legs. I'm having unbearable periods. I'm bleeding a lot. Right. And that's when we discovered that they've grown to these enormous sizes that now need to be surgically removed. So there's two advocating for myself there. One is when it first happened, and the second one is when we thought it was something else, but nobody looked into it further. And I didn't ask because I was afraid that they were going to say I'm a hypochondriac, because I go in and they're like, nothing's wrong. Stop making up stories about yourself, Victoria.
Right. Well, and I think too, like once it's so interesting that like once, you know, you kind of get the okay on the fibroids, like they kind of just move to the back of your mind a little bit too, because it was like, well, now I've got this new problem. It can't just be a flare up of my old problem.
Right, because they told me it was normal.
Oh, yeah.
Tons of women get them in their 30s, and it's just a normal thing that happens in your uterus. Listen to me very clearly, everyone out there. It's not normal to have growths on your organs.
True. I don't mean to laugh. It's just,
no, you can laugh. I'm being a bit sarcastic here, but I'm not. Like, it's not normal. But doctor okay, and to just ignore it. And here's the other thing, my other like beef with women's health. So they've given them this name fibroid, right? Which sounds scary. So like, oh, extra fiber, extra whatever, extra like rings of like flesh or whatever. I know it might sound weird here, but why they're called fibroids only for the uterus in women's health. But what they actually are, and when they talk about them like deeper in the healthcare system, they've renamed them. They're benign tumors that could become cancerous. I mean, there's only a 1% chance they can become cancerous, but let's call them what they are. They're tumors. But for some reason in women's health, they've been renamed to fibroids, which doesn't sound as scary.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah, so they're tumors.
Right.
And if someone said you have a 1 centimeter tumor on your kidney, on your liver, in your stomach, you wouldn't. And then they said, oh, but it's normal. You'd be like, that's not normal.
Right. Totally.
Right.
Yeah. I think unfortunately not that it's normal either, but to name something else when it's women's health is just like, it's like a trend. I don't know why we do it. I don't know if it makes it also like kind of removes the ability to study it together. which is annoying in a way.
It makes
Or
it
I don't really know. Like,
less
I don't know.
important. In my
Mm-hmm.
mind, this is how I feel, and this is just my opinion. It makes me feel that it's less important, that the tumors are less important, and that my health is undervalued.
Now, would there have been non-surgical options had you found them?
Yes.
In an in-between size? Yeah.
Yeah. So right away, we could have dealt with them when they were that small. And there's a very small, like, in and out procedure where they will cut off the veins that are feeding the blood supply to them, and then they will like shrivel off and die.
Right.
I can't have that done now. They're too big.
Okay.
And then, probably when I had the hypothyroidism scare, they probably weren't as large as they are now. They could have been removed laparoscopically, but now they're so big that it has to be full open surgery. So I'm going to have, I don't know, 4 to 6 centimeter incision on my stomach to remove them. And the recovery is 4 to 6 weeks versus if those other, if we had dealt with them, they were smaller, the recovery would have been 1 to 2 weeks, basically. Yeah, it's 4 to 6 weeks, and it's a lot of resting, no working out, this sort. So yes, good question, right? And again, that's a big part of my regret too, is that I didn't advocate, and now I have to go fully under and get this surgery. And yeah, that's my story. I don't know if I'll be able to have kids. And that's another thing that I'm ignoring right now until I know the truth, because there's no point in me really worrying about it and causing myself that stress. So yeah, good question.
It's so tough when people are like, well, stress causes this, so don't stress about this stressful situation.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? Like,
this is why like I started my business Recreo to give like real strategies about things that you can do for stress and worry. And I like, this is a real strategy. That's why you and I want to do this podcast too, like just actually release it and write it out and journal it and talk and put it out to the world and get feedback. But that's why I started my business too, because one of the first, this is a little bit of a tangent, I'm going to tell it. When I was really starting to burn out at my 9-to-5 job and started developing anxiety and panic and all those sorts of things, which you talked about in other podcast episodes. A couple of my coworkers were feeling the same, and they brought in a public health nurse to give us a stress awareness workshop. And basically what they said was, take 5 deep breaths, have a bath, and take vacation. Those aren't real strategies.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like when you're in it and someone tells you, don't worry, don't stress, have a bath, it's like the worst thing you could hear. Like in your head, you're like, yeah, I'm like way deeper into this than that.
Totally.
I'm way deeper into my anxiety than having a bath and everything's going to be okay. Like,
yeah. And they always put the pressure back on the individual, right? Like a company brings in a speaker to be like, hey, you should take your vacation. And it's like, hey, as a company, you should be making sure I take my vacation, or
and
creating
you should be
space
paying me for my
to
vacation
allow for it. Yeah, definitely. So no, that's super frustrating. And I'm sorry you're going through that, like before and now. And who knows, like, especially now with like, again, you don't want to throw the word selfish around because COVID is very scary and people are dying at an alarming rate still. But like, you're like, but hey, like I found it now. I took the steps. I know what's wrong. And now you're having to wait even longer. And like, that sucks. That stinks out loud.
Yeah, it stinks out loud. And you know what? It's okay to sometimes sit in it too.
Right.
To not for too long, but to sit in it and to say it sucks. Right. And I'm saying it sucks. And it's okay. And I give myself permission to say it sucks.
Good, because like I don't think, like, people will be like, well, stay positive about it and don't talk about it that way because that's just gonna make it worse. But like, it is what it is. Like, I don't see how talking about, like, if anything, holding in how much it sucks is going to make it worse, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, that's like the definition of toxic positivity, right? Like
Right.
repressing our feelings. So say it sucks, practice letting go, which is what we're doing, and then take it day by day.
Right.
So I don't want to sit in the suck, but I'm giving myself permission to say,
yeah,
this sucks.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it doesn't feel good. And I don't
Right.
feel good.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not helping me to be angry about it. So I'm not angry. I'm a little angry, but not fully. I just, I'm open to talking about it on whatever platform I can, because I think women need to hear this story. And I think once I started talking about it, other women started telling me their story. So I started listening too, and to think, yeah, there needs to be advocacy for fibroid health and women's health, and maybe even getting rid of the term fibroid and calling it what it is. It's a tumor, and it needs to be treated like a tumor. And my uterus is an important part of my body. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Wow. Again, like, thank you. I really thank you specifically around this idea that, like, with follow-ups, when you have something wrong with you, I think it's so easy to just, like, and it's not just like the medical system or you or anyone, it's just like, you have a problem, you get it checked on once a year for 3 years, you're done. Like, that's just the way that it works. And like, it's so frustrating that, like, sometimes the easiest answer is the hardest one to find again. Like, it would have been so easy to look back and be like, oh, hey, do you not think that maybe this is it and not just some brand new thing? Like, yeah, I have other examples of this, but I'm going to just park them for now. Cause like, I do hear you. This is not fun. This is horrible. I just, and I
want to say this too. Like, I take personal responsibility too. Like, my regret is twofold, is that I didn't speak up for myself. So I've regret about not speaking up for myself, but then I also have anger that my healthcare professionals didn't speak up for me either, or remember, or take a minute to look back into my file and remember everything going on in my body. So, but I still want to say, I'm not like completely blaming my healthcare professionals because I didn't speak up for myself either. But so it's like a 50-50 here is basically what I'm saying. But
sure. I'm just saying I can see how easy it is to fall into that. Yeah. And I think everyone has at least one story like that, whether it's like this kind of issue or something similar, where, like, again,
I mean, I have two. I've already told, so I've told this one and told the one about my mental health as well, right? And advocating for that. So yeah. And I'm still living day by day and finding joy and finding ways to be connected and to have a valuable, valued, loved human experience. So that's amazing. Yeah, that's it. Shall we do our 3 breaths of letting go?
Yes. Would you like to lead it as our meditation expert?
Not expert, but I'm okay at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, come on to the front of your chair, as long as you're not driving, and make sure your feet are flat on the floor. And you know that gravity is supporting you. The earth is always supporting you. It's always keeping you connected. One hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. Take a big breath and say to yourself, I release pressure and let go of expectations. On this next breath, say to yourself, I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. And on this last breath, say to yourself, I am excited and motivated to move forward one day at a time. Thank you, my friend Shadoe.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, listeners.
We hope you have an awesome day, and we look forward to talking with you next time. Okay, bye, everybody.
This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadoe and Victoria Muir-Bercia.
Editing by me, Victoria Muir-Bercia.
We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
If you think this podcast sends a valuable message, you had an aha moment, or learned something new about yourself, help us realize our goal of reaching as many listeners as possible.
We encourage you to take action and support us right now by choosing one of the following options.
You can easily support us by
following us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Leave a tip at coffee.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast. That's ko-fi.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast.
Join our conversations in the Facebook group, Let's Relieve Regret Podcast.
Find all this information, all the links, and more in the podcast notes. Okay, bye.
Bye.